It began as a whisper, a half-heard conversation in the hallway, an aide's mistake, a glance too long at a locked drawer in Clarence's house. But that whisper roared into a firestorm when Prince William, for the first time in decades, uttered words no royal dared speak aloud. The letter exists, and it's still in Clarence's house. A ghost from the past was stirring, and it had Diana's handwriting all over it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, the existence of a secret letter written by Princess Diana had circulated in royal gossip circles like a forbidden prayer spoken in hushed tones, dismissed in official records but impossible to forget. Many assumed it was nothing more than tabloid fantasy, one of countless rumors born from Diana's tragic death and the palace's cold response. But everything changed the moment William confirmed it, not just in passing or implication, but in a direct, deliberate statement that left even hardened courtiers frozen in disbelief. In that single admission, he shattered decades of silence and summoned the shadow of his mother back into the heart of the monarchy. Clarence's house had long positioned itself as the forward-facing home of the next era, scrubbed clean of Diana's presence, her photos, her letters, even whispers of her. But this revelation reopened wounds the monarchy thought it had buried. It wasn't just about a letter, it was about what that letter contained and why it had remained hidden. What truth was too dangerous for the world to know? What message had Diana left behind that the palace felt the need to smother under layers of time, protocol, and denial? William's admission didn't come in a press conference or royal interview. It slipped out in a moment of unfiltered honesty, a conversation overheard and never meant for the public. Yet once it emerged, there was no putting it back. The timing was no coincidence. With growing tensions inside the palace, ongoing friction with his father Charles, and Camilla's controversial rise to queen consort, William found himself cornered by the ghosts of history and the politics of the present. The truth, long buried in shadows, was clawing its way to the surface. What drove him to speak now? Allies closest to William described a man increasingly consumed by quiet frustration with the monarchy's continued sanitization of Diana's memory, with secrets still held by those who wronged her, and with the weight of a legacy he couldn't protect. He had become haunted not just by her absence, but by the unfinished story she left behind. That letter, locked away in Clarence's house, was more than a message. It was a reckoning the monarchy had spent years avoiding. What made this even more dangerous was the uncertainty. No one outside a tiny circle knew the letter's full contents. Was it a warning, a confession, a condemnation? Did it mention names once still active in the corridors of royal power? William's decision to confirm the letter's existence was not just an emotional outburst. It was a calculated risk, a challenge to those who had kept the lid on for so long. It was a signal that he was ready to reopen the story of his mother, not the official version curated by press statements, but the raw, painful human truth. And this truth had been hidden in the very house where his father and stepmother now reigned. He knew the consequences. He understood what it meant to open the door to a truth the monarchy had worked so hard to bury. But he did it anyway, because some legacies don't die with silence. Some legacies leave letters, and one of them was still waiting, quietly, in Clarence's house. But to understand why William broke the royal silence, we must travel back to the haunting moment this letter was written. In her final days, Diana felt something closing in, not just the paparazzi, not just the royal machine, but a tightening web of betrayal. What she penned on that pale blue stationery wasn't a letter. It was a warning, a farewell, a revelation. And she addressed it not to the world, but to her son. She had always known that silence was her most dangerous enemy. As the mother of a future king, her voice had long been dismissed, diluted, or carefully redirected by the palace machinery. But Diana, stripped of her royal titles yet never of her spirit, sensed that something far more sinister was unfolding behind the curtains of royal life. Friends who once stood close had grown distant. Surveillance felt sharper. Conversations were being monitored. What had once been mere unease began to crystallize into fear. Was it paranoia or something deeper? Diana herself couldn't tell. but she trusted her instincts more than any protocol. And those instincts screamed one thing: leave something behind, something William would one day find, something no one else could twist or destroy. So she did. She wrote it in longhand, alone in the Kensington Palace drawing room, with no assistants, no staff, no distractions. The ink trembled with urgency. She didn't call it a letter. In her mind, it was more like a code, a key for William to one day unlock the truths she couldn't say aloud. Carefully, she wove her fears into metaphors, naming no names but painting pictures with devastating clarity. She hinted at surveillance not just by tabloids, but by figures within the palace. She expressed heartbreak over manipulated custody agreements, warning of people around Charles whose influence far outweighs their role. She made passing reference to a friend turned shadow, a figure whose name she dared not write, but most painfully she ended the letter not with love, but with an instruction: don't believe everything they tell you, even if they wear your blood. This wasn't a farewell drenched in sorrow. It was strategic. Diana, always 10 steps ahead, didn't just write a goodbye, she wrote a map. And then she made sure no one would find it, no one but William. She folded it with care, wrapped it in a handkerchief embroidered with his childhood initials, and placed it in a plain white envelope. No royal crest, no signature, just a small, almost forgettable package. She knew palace eyes were always watching, so she hid it. Not in Kensington, not in a vault, but somewhere unexpected where no one would look until the time was right. But after her death, the world spun too fast. The tragedy in Paris, the global mourning, the unprecedented silence of the royals, and then, nothing. The letter vanished. William never received it. No staffer mentioned it. No trace in her personal effects. Just rumors, whispers. Some said it had been destroyed by palace aides trying to protect the family. Others believed Charles himself ordered its removal, fearing it would confuse the narrative. Still others blamed Camilla, insinuating she had more to lose from Diana's final words than anyone else. But the truth remained hidden. The letter was gone. And for years, William believed it had been lost forever, until a single conversation changed everything. But someone inside the palace knew about the letter, and they made sure it would never see the light of day. Or so they thought. Clarence House was supposed to be a symbol of transition, of Charles's rebirth after Diana. But beneath its polished facade lies a carefully orchestrated system of erasure. Staff rotations, burned diaries, sealed files, and one drawer that no one could open without a key passed down only once. After Diana's death, Clarence House didn't just become the Prince of Wales's residence. It became the epicenter of narrative control. From the outside, it was redecorated in soft tones and classic furnishings, projecting stability and modernity. But behind those walls, a different kind of renovation took place, one not of paint or chandeliers, but of memories. Anything bearing Diana's mark was quietly removed. Letters, photographs, diaries, all either relocated to storage or destroyed under the vague justification of streamlining royal archives. It wasn't a remodel. It was a purge, a deliberate erasure of everything that could remind the future king and the public of the woman who had once made the monarchy tremble. The operation wasn't clumsy. It was surgical. Staff who had been close to Diana were let go under polite pretenses. New personnel were hired discreet, obedient, unburdened by loyalty to the past. And somewhere in the midst of this controlled cleansing, a young assistant made a mistake. Fresh from university, unaware of the unspoken rules, she asked about a locked box labeled only with Diana's initials. The next day she was gone. No warning, no explanation. Her dismissal wasn't just swift, it was silent. From then on, everyone got the message: don't ask about the past, especially if it bleeds. And then there was the black file. Kept in a drawer only Charles's private secretary accessed, it was the palace's worst-kept secret. Rumored to contain internal memos, confidential correspondences, and flagged documents too sensitive to be archived publicly. The black file was guarded not by locks but by silence. One entry, according to a former cleaner, had a single line typed across the front: from KP, do not circulate. KP of course being Kensington Palace, Diana's last royal residence. Beneath the east wing of Clarence House sat a vault, concealed behind what appeared to be an ordinary bookcase. Only 2 people reportedly had access to its contents: Charles's personal archivist and a senior security officer whose name never appeared in official staff lists. That vault, insiders whispered, didn't just contain sensitive financial records or royal wills. It held the things that could burn the House of Windsor to the ground if they ever saw daylight. And at the center of all these whispers, one name kept resurfacing: Camilla. She had entered Clarence House not just as a partner, but as a power player. Her influence, once subtle, grew bolder with every passing year. It was said she personally oversaw the redecoration of the sitting room where Diana had once met aides. A painting Diana loved was removed. Even the carpet was changed. Some claimed it was simply preference. Others saw it for what it was: a final sweep to erase a ghost. But no matter how carefully the past was scrubbed away, it left shadows. Shadows like the one seen in 2003, when a night security guard on rotation claimed he'd discovered a torn envelope in a bin, half-burnt but unmistakably marked in Diana's distinctive script. The guard was gone by the end of the week. No pension, no statement, just gone. Years passed, the walls of Clarence House stayed quiet, but the silence was never peace, it was fear. Because those within knew that while the letter may have been buried, it hadn't been forgotten. And if it surfaced, it wouldn't just tell a story, it would rewrite one. Because in a world of perfectly curated images and ceremonial smiles, a single handwritten letter from Diana could ignite a reckoning the monarchy wasn't prepared to face. But as the years passed, the letter became more than a relic, it became a weapon. And someone was ready to use it. While the cameras saw the dutiful prince, behind closed doors, William was unraveling sleepless nights, secret meetings with old aides, even confronting his father behind closed doors. Because William wasn't just grieving his mother, he was chasing her voice. A voice locked in a house built to silence her. The pressure of legacy can crush a man, but the pressure of a silenced truth that shatters him from the inside. William had been raised to uphold the institution, to protect the crown at all costs. But every public smile masked a storm gathering beneath. The older he grew, the more he realized how little he truly knew about his mother's final months. The official accounts no longer satisfied him. The timelines didn't add up. The silences became louder, and the people once closest to Diana, those who had been quickly dismissed or quietly demoted, were now either unwilling or afraid to speak. That's when William began reaching out in secret. 2 former aides from Kensington Palace agreed to meet under absolute confidentiality. What they revealed didn't just unsettle him, it changed everything. Conversations that had been cut short, letters redirected, an entire correspondence trail that abruptly ended days before her death. Diana hadn't faded into the background, she had been erased. And as William dug deeper, the rift between father and son widened. Charles insisted the past had been honored, that Diana's memory had been preserved with dignity. But William saw it differently. Her essence had been stripped down to a portrait and a plaque. There were no raw truths, no context, no acknowledgement of what she'd suffered. Every time William tried to raise the issue of what had been hidden or taken from her private quarters, he was met with vague deflections or bureaucratic excuses. Tensions boiled over when he questioned why her letters weren't part of the official royal archive. And when he demanded answers about a missing file from Clarence House, Charles reportedly walked out of the room. But the confrontation that shook him most wasn't with his father, it was with Camilla. Behind closed doors, away from the polished smiles, the atmosphere was far from cordial. William's polite mask slipped. He accused her of helping to erase Diana's memory to build her own legitimacy. Camilla, poised and calm, replied only that certain things are better left in the past. It was a response William never forgot and never forgave. Determined and exhausted, William attempted quiet retrievals over the years. On more than one occasion, he arranged discreet inspections of storage units linked to Clarence House. Documents marked with Diana's initials were often redacted, incomplete, or mysteriously misplaced. But the moment that broke him was in 2018, when he believed he'd finally recovered a lost letter, only to discover it was a crude forgery. Not his mother's hand, not her words. Just a decoy. He didn't speak to anyone for 3 days after that. According to insiders, it was the only time Kate saw him cry without saying a single word. Still, he didn't give up. Because something inside him deeper than duty, older than grief, refused to let it go. Diana's story hadn't ended in Paris. A piece of her still waited, hidden, suppressed, protected by those who feared what she had to say. William no longer sought justice. He wanted connection. He wanted the truth his mother had tried to leave behind. And then, out of nowhere, that truth knocked on his door, disguised in the past uniform of a man the palace had long forgotten. But everything changed when a former royal security officer handed William something that reignited his mission. He had once laid out Diana's evening dresses. Now, decades later, he placed a tattered envelope in William's hands. "Your mother asked me to give this to you, when the time was right." What was inside would fracture the royal family more deeply than any scandal yet. The man before William wasn't a stranger. He had once been a quiet constant in Diana's chaotic royal life. Her butler, her confidant, her silent shadow during moments the public never saw. He had vanished from public view after her death, slipping into a life of deliberate obscurity, saying nothing, writing nothing, speaking to no one. But he had never forgotten. And he had never let go of what Diana entrusted him with. His voice trembled as he explained how Diana had summoned him late one evening, days before her Paris trip. She handed him 2 things, a sealed letter and a spare key. "If anything happens to me," she said, "make sure William finds this when he's ready. Not before, not unless he asks." For years he kept her secret, not because he didn't want to speak, but because he knew what the consequences could be. For her memory, for him, and for William. He had tried once, shortly after Diana's funeral, to pass along a message to Charles. The reply came swiftly, his palace access revoked, his reputation quietly tarnished. That was his warning. Speak of the letter, and the walls close in. So he waited. He waited through the years of silence, through the tabloid storms, through the public rebranding of Diana as a tragic icon, rather than the warrior she truly was. And when William finally began to ask the right questions, when his search turned desperate, the butler knew the time had come. Inside the envelope was not the letter itself, but something equally explosive, a map of Clarence house, hand-drawn, marked with an X over one of the lesser-known sitting rooms. Alongside it, a single brass key. Not to a room, to a drawer. A drawer built into a cabinet that hadn't been moved in over 20 years. The revelation hit William like a bolt of ice. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply stared at the key, then at the butler's eyes. Eyes that had once wept beside his mother's coffin, eyes that had seen far more than they ever revealed. Emotions surged through him, gratitude, grief, rage, the realization that someone had stood guard over this final connection to his mother in silence for decades, broke something loose inside him. The years of suspicion, the bitter fights with his father, the fruitless searches, the lies, everything suddenly aligned. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a turning point. He rose without a word, the map in one hand, the key in the other. William no longer cared about the consequences. He didn't care about protocol or palace procedures. All that mattered now was what Diana had tried to tell him, what had been locked away for so long behind walls that claimed to protect but had only ever concealed. And if the royal machine tried to stop him now, they would face a prince no longer willing to play the role assigned to him. But even with the key in hand, the gates of Clarence house would not open quietly. It wasn't meant to happen like this. William stormed into Clarence house not as a son but as Diana's defender, and standing in his way was the woman who had haunted his mother's tears. In that moment, the monarchy cracked, because what was said in that room between William and Camilla was never supposed to be heard. He arrived without announcement, bypassing aides, ignoring calls, refusing to be stopped. The key was in his pocket. The map was folded inside his jacket, but what burned more fiercely than either was the fire in his chest, a fury ignited by years of denial, evasion, and hollow tributes to a woman the institution had tried to erase. William hadn't come to negotiate. He came for answers. And as he crossed the familiar threshold of Clarence's house, everything around him blurred except the mission. But before he could reach the sitting room, she appeared. Camilla, composed, icy, unmoved. She demanded an explanation. He gave her none. She reminded him of protocol. He reminded her of history. The exchange spiraled fast, two storms colliding in a house too old and too full of secrets to hold them. William accused her outright. She was silenced. You helped. Camilla didn't flinch. Her response was cold and deliberate. You're not ready to know what's in that letter. It was a statement, not a warning, and it rattled William more than he showed. That wasn't denial. It was confirmation, a slip in her armor, a tell that she knew exactly what Diana had written and that it threatened everything built since. Their voices rose, not just in volume but in intensity. Decades of pain surged through William's words. Camilla, for once, didn't retreat behind formality. She struck back, defending Charles, defending herself, shifting blame onto the past and insisting William didn't understand how fragile the crown really was. But William wasn't there to protect the crown. He was there to defend the woman who'd been betrayed by it. Every word was a crack in the royal wall, every accusation another blow to the illusion of unity. Behind a nearby door, a junior staff member stood frozen, phone in hand. He recorded fragments, not full sentences, but sharp, damning flashes. You erased her memory. You'll never control her voice. I won't be silent just because you were patient. Those fragments would later leak, quietly, strategically. No video, only audio. Enough to stir whispers, enough to confirm something seismic had occurred behind palace doors. But in that moment, William didn't care who heard. He pushed past Camilla, refusing to be halted by titles or thrones. Clarence's house had taken something from him, and he had come to take it back. This wasn't a prince defying his stepmother. This was Diana's son reclaiming the voice they'd buried with her. And the moment his hand touched that drawer, just as the brass key met the lock, something shifted. The silence in the room wasn't just tension. It was a prelude, a heartbeat before impact. He had breached the final gate, and whatever was inside would not only answer his questions, it would alter everything. But despite the fury and heartbreak, William did find what he was looking for, and what he read shattered him. It was only 4 pages. But every sentence carried the weight of betrayal, fear, and motherly love. Diana wrote of secrets too dangerous to speak, names never uttered in public, and a chilling final line: if this reaches you, they failed to bury me completely. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant but urgent, every word brimming with purpose. William sat in stunned silence as the words of the mother he lost, the woman the world mourned, reached out to him from the past. The letter wasn't poetic, it was raw, fragmented, at times emotional, at times clinical. But beneath the grief lay a clear pattern. Diana hadn't written this letter as a farewell, she had written it as a warning, a map through the fog of manipulation that had surrounded her, even in her final days. She detailed how conversations inside Kensington Palace were being leaked, how her calls felt monitored, how certain staffers once loyal suddenly shifted allegiance. She spoke of unnamed figures whispering to Charles, advising him to limit her public engagements. She never accused outright. But she didn't need to. The implications were devastating. One passage struck William hardest. They will shape you with silence, make you doubt what I stood for. But remember, there's a difference between the crown and the people who guard it. It was a plea to separate legacy from machinery. Diana was still defending the institution, even as she was torn apart by it. Her pain was laid bare when she wrote of being cut off from William and Harry, of the nights she cried alone after being told they were unavailable for visits. The hurt wasn't just maternal, it was institutional. She had become a threat, and the system responded the only way it knew how, by erasing her. But the most alarming moment came in a passage she deliberately disguised in metaphor. She referenced a shadow behind the throne, a person close to Charles whose influence, she warned, was not political but personal. If he trusts them, he will never see clearly again, she wrote. William read that line again and again. It wasn't about Charles's advisors. It was about someone deeper inside, someone Diana feared had more power than the king himself. She never named this person, but the implication was chilling. It wasn't about paranoia, it was about proximity to danger disguised as counsel. By the time William reached the final page, his hands trembled. He didn't cry immediately. He just stared. The room felt heavy, as if the letter had pulled the oxygen from the air. The words "they failed to bury me" completely echoed in his mind over and over. Diana hadn't just anticipated betrayal, she had documented it. And now, in his hands, was not just her final voice, but her final challenge. The question wasn't just what the letter said, it was what William was meant to do with it. The crown stood untouched on the surface, but beneath it, something was rotting. Diana had seen it, William had found it, and now, for the first time in his life, he had the power to confront it. But what would he do with this truth? And could the monarchy survive it? With the letter in his possession, William stood at a crossroads. One path protected the monarchy, the other honored his mother. But he knew, whichever choice he made, there would be no turning back. And somewhere deep inside Buckingham Palace, they were watching him decide. It wasn't just a question of right and wrong, it was a test of identity. Was William merely the heir, bound to guard the very institution that had hurt the woman who gave him life? Or was he his mother's son, willing to risk everything to ensure her voice was finally heard? The weight of the letter was no longer in its pages, but in the moral burden it placed on him. He paced the corridors of Kensington Palace like a man trapped between two legacies. Tradition told him to protect the crown. Conscience begged him to protect the truth. For days he said nothing publicly, but behind the scenes he confided in the only person he trusted completely, Kate. She read the letter once, then twice, and then she looked at him with tears in her eyes and said only this: dignified justice. That's what she'd want. Not vengeance, not scandal, but a reckoning grounded in truth, not rage. Still, the walls were closing in. Word of the confrontation at Clarence house had leaked in fragmented whispers, audio snippets, staff gossip. The press hadn't run it yet. But royal aides were panicking. They urged William to stay silent. They cloaked it in patriotic language for the nation's stability, to protect your future, to spare your children. But William recognized the tone. It was the same one Diana had heard when she was told to smile and wave through betrayal. And then, from across the ocean, came Harry. The younger brother who had long walked away from the palace machine, now suddenly reconnected in a flurry of late-night calls. When William told him about the letter, Harry didn't hesitate. Release it, burn them all down. But William couldn't, not because he was afraid, because he knew the consequences. The monarchy wouldn't collapse overnight, but trust would. The people's faith in the institution, in the stability of it all, would be shaken in ways no press office could repair. And somewhere beneath the layers of anger and grief, William still believed the monarchy could be better if it faced its own truths. But time was running out. The public had sensed something. The leaks stirred curiosity, and the tabloids were circling. The silence around Diana's name was cracking. And yet, William didn't destroy the letter, nor did he release it. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He preserved it, quietly, securely, not buried, not erased, waiting, because he knew the moment wasn't now, but it would come. The truth didn't need to scream, it only needed to survive. And so the letter returned, not to fire, but to shadows. Until now. It remains hidden, sealed, protected, waiting. But now we know it exists. And with William's confirmation, the myth became truth. The monarchy may endure, but so will the voice of a mother who refused to be forgotten. Her letter still breathes in Clarence house, and one day it may speak again. It happened quietly, no headlines, no official statement. But to those paying attention, it was deafening. During a charity event meant to honor frontline workers, William stepped off script. In a single, unscripted moment, he spoke of unfinished truths, of voices long silenced but never lost, and of the responsibility we carry not just for the present, but for the echoes of the past. It was subtle. But to the press, it was a coded message. And once the decoding began, there was no turning back. Analysts, royal watchers, even former palace staff weighed in. They all arrived at the same conclusion: William had confirmed what the palace spent decades denying. Diana's letter existed, and it hadn't been destroyed. The response was immediate. Media outlets scrambled, front pages were plastered with headlines they once dismissed as conspiracy. Talk shows dissected the subtext. Online forums exploded. And in the middle of the storm, the palace said nothing. No denial, no clarification. Just silence, the kind that doesn't protect, but exposes. Camilla made no public appearances for nearly 2 weeks. Charles was noticeably absent from scheduled engagements. And William? He remained calm, steady, unshaken. For the first time in years, the future king wasn't just being watched, he was being read. But what truly shifted was public perception. Diana, once framed as the tragic outsider, now re-emerged as the prophetic truth-teller. The woman the institution had tried to reduce to sentiment was now recognized as a strategist, a mother who saw the game before anyone else. Camilla, long on the road to public acceptance, found herself recast again as a figure of controversy, tied not just to a past affair, but to a present silence. And the monarchy itself, its image, polished and controlled for so long, now shimmered with cracks, not from scandal, but from memory. Because the letter, though unread by the public, had already done its damage not by revelation, but by existing. That's the power of what remains hidden. It shapes the present not through exposure, but through possibility. The mere fact that Diana wrote it, that William has it, and that it wasn't buried, changes everything. It reminds the world that not all truths come with announcements. Some live in quiet defiance, tucked away in drawers, waiting for the right moment to rise. And for William, the journey doesn't end with possession. It begins. The letter is more than paper and ink. It's a bond, a burden, a compass. It may never be released, or it may arrive at a time when the monarchy is once again standing at the edge of its own contradictions. Either way, one fact is now undeniable. Diana was never gone. She was only waiting. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe, because what's coming next will shake the monarchy again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.